So you're playing Genshin, you're doing some 10 pulls, and while you don't get a 5-star, you do get 4-star Sucrose. Now what do you get with Sucrose besides a character that it took me over a year to get? Well, Sucrose is a catalyst-wielding animo user who is really good at grouping enemies and sharing EM. And in this video, we're going to look at the basics of Sucrose. So let's go look at how her kit works. Now because Sucrose is a catalyst user, her normal attacks and her charge attacks are going to do animo damage always. We're not talking about shenanigans with like Eye of Perception or anything like that, right? We are just talking standard Sucroseology, right, where she is going to be doing animo damage through her normal and her charge attacks. Her normal attacks are going to just kind of be like a puff of air, wind, whatever you want to call it, animo, and her charge attack is going to push smaller enemies back. Now something else with her normal and her charge attacks, because they are animo, if other elements are present, she will swirl them, doing extra instances of damage. Now her skill, she is going to do an AoE animo damage that is also going to group the enemies a little bit. It's going to pull them together, grouping just a little bit, and of course swirling any elements that are present once again. Something else to note is that down here I have 2 charges on my skill. That is because my Sucrose is C1, which is a really good constellation for Sucrose, but you might notice I've used it like 3 times. And that is because of the weapon that I have on Sucrose, which is Sac Frags, and we're going to talk more about that whenever we get to that portion of the video. Now her burst, she is going to take this vial, chunk it in the air, and is basically going to create an unstable animo spirit. It's kind of like the animo hypostasis, but not exactly. This is going to do multiple instances of animo AoE damage, swirling whatever is around and grouping. It's going to kind of pull enemies in and then toss them up, and then pull enemies in and toss them up. This also has elemental infusion. So just like Kazuha's burst or like Lynette's burst, if you introduce an element to Sucrose's burst, it will absorb it. As you can see here, the fire on the grass was absorbed by Sucrose's burst, making it swirl pyro every time it throws the enemy up and does damage to them. Now, both her skill and her burst work with her passives. Where her first passive, when Sucrose triggers a swirl reaction using anything, her skill, her burst, normal attacks, charge attacks, all characters in the party with the matching element, except for Sucrose herself, will get an EM buff of 50. And her other passive, when using her skill or her burst, it's an opponent. It increases all party members' elemental mastery based on 20% of Sucrose. So if you have 1,000 EM on Sucrose, this will pass 200 EM to all the characters on your party. So the second passive works anytime you use her skill or her burst. The first passive only works when you swirl an element, and it only gives it to the specific element that you gave it to. So if, in this team's instance, Sucrose swirls Hydro, Milani will get an extra 50 EM. If she swirls Pyro, Dia will get an extra 50 EM. The one that's team-wide, doesn't matter what you swirl. The one that is only 50 EM, that one's very specific. So now that we looked at her kit, let's go look at some artifacts and weapons. So for Sucrose, her best set's going to be VV, right? This is going to be, it's going to increase her animo damage, it's going to increase her swirl damage, but it's also going to make the enemies weaker to the elements that you swirl, which is really good because it's going to make your on-field damage dealer, right? In this case, Mualani, if we want Mualani to vaporize, then once Sucrose swirls Hydro, the enemies will be weaker to Hydro. Now, because her entire kit revolves around kind of sharing her EM, elemental mastery across the board on her main stats. Now, for weapons, I am running a level 90 R5 Sac Frags on Sucrose. In my opinion, this is her best weapon. It's going to get a elemental mastery, which is going to be great, but then it's passive. You have a chance to reset the skill cooldown, meaning that you can use it more often, right? That's why earlier I was able to use her skill 3 times back to back very fast without having to wait for that cooldown because of her C1 and because of her weapon. So this weapon kind of gives her a C1, and then at C1 it gives you 3 skill uses, which is really good. Now, if you're looking for another weapon to use instead of something like Sac Frags, then you can use Nahita's signature, which is 1,000 floating dreams, which is going to give her more EM, and then it's also going to kind of buff the team a little bit. You're not really caring about getting extra EM based on how many characters in your party that are similar or different or any of that stuff. You're mainly worried about getting the extra EM and then giving more EM to your team. And if you don't have either of these, or you're just looking for something early game, then you can use a 3-star magic guide. This is still going to get her a ton of EM, and the passive you can use, because most of the time you're going to have her in a team where you're either going to have Hydro damage going around or Electro damage going around, whether it's in like a Hyper Bloom or an Aggravate spread team. So you can still use Magic Guide pretty well. Now in Sucrose's next video, we are going to look at some different teams for Sucrose. We're going to do a little bit of a deeper talk into this team with Mualani, Dia. I think I swapped to Xiaoling at some point in the footage. Shilin and Sucrose. This is going to be allowing Sucrose to buff Mualani. This is also going to be something where if you don't have Kazuha, in certain teams you can use Sucrose to great effect if you don't have Kazuha or Shilinen. Some teams, it's not going to matter and you're not really going to be able to use her. But in this particular instance, she is going to be a really, really good option if you don't have Kazuha. And we're also going to talk about other teams where you're going to be using kind of Sucrose on the field as a driver. And this is going to be for like with a bunch of off-field Electro and Dendro damage with like Fischl or Yaimiko or something like that for aggravate reactions, or you can use like Sucrose as an on-field Hyper Blue driver to where you're going to be using like Sucrose, Nihida, Kuki, and Shincho. Right, that's going to be another really, really good option that you can use. But we're going to look at those in the next video. So now we're going to finally show my Sucrose at the end of this video. She is level 70 out of 80. I am working to level up all of my Animo characters to at least level 80. I'm kind of going by element on that. But she does still have all of her passives. She will be level 80 soon. I just don't have the books of the Mora yet. And she has close to 900 EM. Like I said, you kind of want close to 1,000. And then you do want some energy recharge on her to be able to get her burst readily available. You don't necessarily care about her crit split. Then, as you saw earlier, she is running a level 90 R5 Sacrags, and then 4-piece VV. This is kind of my Kazuha set that I've kind of taken from him for the video. And then her talents are only 111. I haven't started leveling up talents. I'm mainly focusing on leveling up a bunch of characters right now. So that'll be it for this video. Kuki has green hair. Sucrose kind of has green hair, I guess you could say. I have green hair, and I will see you in the next one.